verses 1 through 15. Then Joseph could no longer control himself before all those who stood by him, and he cried out, "Send everyone away from me." So no one stayed with him when Joseph made himself known to his brothers. And he wept so loudly that the Egyptians heard it, and the household of Pharaoh heard it. Joseph said to his brothers, "I am Joseph. Is my father still alive?" But his brothers could not answer him, so dismayed were they at his presence. Then Joseph said to his brothers, "Come closer to me." And they came closer. He said, "I am your brother, Joseph, whom you sold into Egypt. And now do not be distressed or angry with yourselves because you sold me here. For God sent me before you to preserve life. For the famine has been in the land these 2 years, and there are 5 more years in which there will be neither plowing nor harvest. God sent me before you to preserve for you a remnant on earth, and to keep alive for you many survivors. So it was not you who sent me here, but God. He has made me a father to Pharaoh, and lord of all his house, and ruler all over all the land of Egypt. Hurry up, go to my father and say to him, 'Thus says your son Joseph, God has made me lord of all Egypt. Come down to me, do not delay. You shall settle in the land of Goshen, and you shall be near me, you and your children and your children's children, as well as your flocks, your herds, and all that you have. I will provide for you there, since there are 5 more years of famine to come, so that you and your household and all that you have will not come to poverty. And now your eyes and the eyes of my brother Benjamin see that it is my own mouth that speaks to you. You must tell my father how greatly I am honored in Egypt and all that you have seen. Hurry and bring my father down here." Then he fell upon his brother Benjamin's neck and wept, while Benjamin wept upon his neck. And he kissed all his brothers and wept upon them. And after that, his brothers talked with him. The second reading is from Romans 11, verses 33 through 36. Oh, the depth of the riches and wisdom and knowledge of God! How unsearchable are his judgments, and how inscrutable his ways! For who has known the mind of the Lord? Or who has been his counselor? Or who has given a gift to him to receive a gift in return? For from him and through him and to him are all things. To him be the glory forever. Amen. God bless the reading and the understanding of his word.
Chris, thank you so much for reading today. Have you ever heard the saying, "Boys don't cry"? Why is that? Why do we say that? Because the boy in our story definitely cried. And if a boy in the Bible story can cry, more power to us. And Joseph is not the only man in the Bible who cried. His father, Jacob, cried. King David, King Saul, the prophets Isaiah and Jeremiah, and in the New Testament, the disciple Peter cried. He broke down. And what about Jesus? There are several accounts in the Bible that Jesus wept. You know, the famous, what does the shoulders verse in the Bible? Jesus wept. And if even Jesus can cry, we're giving you permission to do the same. I know nobody wants to be sad. I get that. We all want to be rather happy than sad. But sometimes we just can't hold it anymore in, just like Joseph did in our story. If you were here last week, you remember the beginning of the story, that the brothers sold Joseph into slavery. And many weeks later, and I hope you all read the whole week between 37 and 45 of what happened, here again, the encounter. So overcome with emotions, he cannot but not cry. Cries of joy, cries of sorrow, and you just let it down. Similar to hearing, "It is well with my soul." You just let it down. And did you actually know that crying is healthy? We humans are the only mammals who can cry. So if it is in the Bible that adult men cry, if we are the only mammals who can cry, please do so. Let it flow. And then some people say, "But in church, I don't want to." No, it would be I feel embarrassed. These are your friends. You're home. You're surrounded by love. And if you can't cry at church, where else can you cry? Maybe in your bedroom, under the blanket. But then you don't have any arms surrounding you and wrapping around you. Because sometimes when we are so down, what we need is just another person and a lot of Kleenex. No questions asked. This is a safe space, even for crying and even for tears, which go so deep that we just cannot put our rational thoughts about it. Because sometimes in life we get so overwhelmed. And that's exactly what happened to Joseph. Again, this is not your typical family reunion, what is going on right now. In between from last week to this week, these are like bookends of the story. So the brothers sold Joseph into slavery. Joseph had all different kinds of ups and downs in Egypt, a lot of adventures, you can say. He now is a high official in the Egyptian government. He has different clothes, speaks a different language, has a different accent, and of course the brothers don't recognize him. The brothers back home was a famine. And we have seen pictures on TV about a famine. And people are now so desperate because there's no food available anywhere that they even go to the enemy and beg for food. Can you just see the emotions coming up? Here, the victim, Joseph, the former victim, sees the perpetrators. There would be so many other ways which Joseph could have reacted. He could have easily said, "Arrest them, throw them in the dungeon, out of here, go back home, or even do the sin of Cain as you wanted to have done to me." But what does Joseph do? He cries. What a powerful story. He just stands there and sits there, sends everybody out, and just let it go. I do not know what hurt you have had in your lives. And maybe the story reminds you, and maybe now you're sniffling up as well because you were not expecting any of that to come up. And that's okay as well. We are here. We're here to surround you with our love, with God's love. So here's Joseph, the victim, the perpetrators. Instead of revenge and anger like the brothers did to him, he chooses forgiveness and reconciliation. And what are his first words? "I am Joseph." He identifies himself and asks, the first question he asks is, "How is my father? How is our father? Is he still alive?" Remember, that was the time before cell phones and social media, so you really had to ask one another how your elderly parent is. Relationships, that's what matter. Family relationships, and I know these can sometimes be very, very hard. And I'm not saying, therefore, you should all go home now and make good with somebody in your family what happened 100 years ago, or whatever, like many years ago. No, I'm not saying that at all. Because sometimes it can be too difficult. And that's okay as well. We are not pushing anybody. We're not pushing anybody if the hurt was too big or just too much to fathom. But this is just an invitation for all of us to leave the past in the past, to go on into your future of peace, reconciliation, and forgiveness. Well, you could say, well, that's like a nice fairy tale. That doesn't happen anywhere else. Okay, go on with life. Go home. Just wait a minute. I have had the privilege to live in 2 countries where there were actually people who hated each other, groups of people. And I know people don't always get along, but the one I'm thinking of, when the Berlin Wall fell in East Germany, there was what they called the state security, the Stasi. Your neighbors could harass you. Your neighbors could report you. Your brother, your sister, your father, your mother, your daughter, your son, anybody could report you, harass you, and make your life really, really difficult. And you had no idea why. A lot of what was going on between the brothers and Joseph. And if you are a spy to work for the system, you get benefits. What about that? A nice vacation. Or what you need to do is give me all your information about your family members. Vacation, family members. How does that sound? There was a lot of betrayal, a lot of hurt, and a lot of family feuds, as you can imagine. Even now, more than 30 years later, there has been not a public Truth and Reconciliation Committee, because it is too painful to know that my neighbor, when my kids were playmates, took all these notes and wrote all of this in files and files and files. I wish the people, the government, or whoever would have said, we need to do some healing one by one, because that hurt is still there. In contrast, South Africa. After the first general election, there was a Truth and Reconciliation Committee, which was chaired by Bishop Desmond Tutu. And he wrote the book of Forgiving. I highly recommend it. It is a hard read. He writes in here how reconciliation and forgiveness can happen, and the pain listening to the stories. But let me read to you what Bishop Tutu writes. He writes on page 2, we chose forgiveness. At the time, we knew that telling the truth and healing our history was the only way to save our country from certain distractions. In our own ways, we are all broken. Out of that brokenness, we hurt others. Forgiveness is the journey we take toward healing the broken part. It is how we become whole again. But how do we let go of resentment when we have been harmed? How can we forgo retribution when what has been taken from us cannot be restored? And I think that's the problem we all struggle with. Those hurts go right here and here, like with a dagger. The Truth and Reconciliation Committee invited people to be in one room, the perpetrator and the victim. And that was hard. That was step number 1, to be in the room together. And then you tell the story of how you got hurt. A lot of tears. The perpetrator had to listen. It is not easy. It is never forced upon. And it's not just say, oh, we easily forget what's going on and we just have a holly-dolly, wonderful time in the future. There is no must, but only a hope. So you tell the story, you name the hurt, you grant forgiveness, and then the last step is either to renew or to release the relationship. It's a healing, transformational journey which goes very, very deep and is not an easy switch. Easy said, easy to write down in a book. But we just sang the hymn, He Lives, the Easter hymn, which we normally sing on Easter morning. And I am convinced that whenever we forgive, whenever there's reconciliation offered, there is a little bit of Easter because the past is gone. And He lives and we live with all our pain and with all what is keeping us down. I shared with you stories about former East Germany and South Africa. And you can easily say, okay, you have a Bible story many, many, many years ago. Then you have both different continents. What has it got to do with us? Let me tell you a story. Just last week, literally 10 days ago, in Ohio. It did not happen in Columbus, but I'm sure it happened in Columbus sometime somewhere. But this story today happened in Cleveland. And I know I read the story, I made a copy of the newspaper article, and I might just cry because it hits home. Too close to home. This is published August 10, 2023, in the WSAZ3 news channel. Mother forgives person who killed her 20-year-old son on his birthday. Cleveland, Ohio. The mother of a 20-year-old man who was shot and killed on his birthday has already found forgiveness for the person accused of the shooting. Carl Jackson was taken to the hospital where he died. Jackson was well known in his community as a star basketball player at his alma mater. He went on to play basketball at Penn State, but moved back home to attend Cleveland State, where he was hired as a student assistant for the men's basketball program. His mother, Kendra Hallower, said to the person who shot him, "I forgive you. I am grateful for the time I had him," she said. "I am grateful I was his mom." Hallower said she expressed concern to her son before he went out over the weekend, but Jackson said he would leave if they spotted trouble. Holloway's school principal doesn't believe her son was a target because he'd never had a gun. He's never been in trouble with the law. Quote, "He had the purest heart ever. He meant nobody any harm. He was such a good person. He did not like confrontation." Jackson's goals, according to his mother, was to work as a college basketball coach one day. She prepares to bury her son. Holloway wishes she could hug him one more time. No arrests have been made. East Cleveland police could not be reached for comments on the investigation. This hit home. My kids are that age. It could have been them. I can't even fathom. It could have been them. Could have been anybody, anytime. I do not know how I would react if I were the mom. I do not know. I don't even want to think about it. And I do not even know how I would react if I were Joseph in our story. Could I forgive my brothers who sold me into slavery? Could I forgive the hurt they have done to me? I don't know. That's okay. And that's why I need you. I need you. If a story like that ever comes up, I need your support. Hopefully never ever does anybody here has to go through a situation like this. But if there is, we want to be there for you. We don't want to tell you what to do, but we can just wrap our arms as wide as we can around you and sit there in those tears with you. It is not easy. And sometimes it is even more difficult if it's a family member, because of all the baggage, of all the stories there is. I need you. And I need a lot of Jesus to get me through any situation if that would ever appear. The story of Joseph, the story in the newspaper, for me are inspirations. Inspirations that there is a way different than revenge and hate in this world. And hopefully, we can all do our little steps to go forward and to heal the world one person at a time. Thank you for being you. Amen.